My name is Alyssa Grant, and at 29, I thought I had gotten used to being the invisible one in my family. Growing up on the sweeping fields of Grant Ranch just outside Nashville, everyone in town knew my last name. They knew the wealth, the land, the power that came with it. But what they didn't know was that inside those mansion walls, I was treated like an afterthought. My brother, Colton, was the king of the castle. I was the ghost no one bothered to see. That truth hit me harder than ever on the night of my father's 60th birthday celebration, a grand event held in a massive white tent overlooking the ranch's western pasture. More than 300 guests filled the space: politicians, developers, mega church pastors, country club regulars, all laughing under strings of golden lights. I stood near the back, clutching a glass of sweet tea, trying to blend into the shadows like I always did. My father, Richard Grant, took the stage wearing his favorite black cowboy boots and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. He tapped the microphone, and the chatter quieted instantly. "Tonight," he boomed, "we honor legacy, we honor grit, and we honor the future of Grant Ranch." My stomach tightened. I already knew who the future was. Then he pulled out a glossy envelope, thick, crisp, expensive. The crowd leaned in. My mother's smile widened. Colton straightened his shoulders like he was posing for a magazine cover. "This," my father announced, holding the envelope high, "is the deed to the entire West Pasture. Over 200 acres of prime development land." People gasped. Cameras flashed. "And I am proud to hand it to my son, Colton Grant." The room erupted in applause. Colton swaggered onto the stage, shaking hands as if he had won an election. He didn't earn it, not a single acre, but he took the deed with a grin, lifting it like a trophy. I felt my chest cave in. That pasture wasn't just land. It was the heart of my grandfather's legacy, the land he had said would one day go to the child with the strongest moral compass. And he had meant me. He always told me that privately, but no one else ever listened. My father's eyes suddenly locked onto mine through the crowd. He said into the microphone, his tone tightening, "And Alyssa, it's time you learned to make your own way. No more relying on us." A few people turned to look at me with awkward sympathy. Some whispered, someone even laughed under their breath. Heat rose up my neck, my hands shook. It felt like they had stripped me naked in front of the entire city. Just when I thought I might break, the tent's entrance parted. A woman in a sharp gray blazer stepped inside, moving with a confidence that made the entire room shift. Her hair was tied back. Her expression was unreadable. She stopped right beside the stage and spoke without waiting for permission. "My name is Eleanor Briggs," she said, her voice steady. "I was Harold Grant's personal attorney." The crowd hushed instantly. My grandfather's name carried weight, more weight than my father liked to admit. Eleanor held up a sealed document. "Mr. Grant left behind a private will, separate from the one your family made public." She swept the room. "And it names a single heir." My father's face drained. My mother's fingers tightened around her champagne glass. Colton stopped smiling. Eleanor looked directly at me. Before she could continue, I felt something rise in my chest, a strange mixture of fear, disbelief, and something I hadn't felt in years: possibility. And right here, as everything I knew was hanging on a single sentence, I want to ask you something. If you've ever been dismissed, ignored, or belittled by your own family, share your story in the comments. Hit the like button so more people who felt invisible can find this video. And subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. Eleanor lifted the document higher. "The true heir," she said slowly, "to the West Pasture and to all assets tied to Harold Grant's legacy is Alyssa Grant." The tent fell silent. No applause, no whispers, just shock. And for the first time in my life, every eye in the room was on me. For a long moment after Eleanor spoke my name, I couldn't move. The whole tent felt like it tilted, as if reality itself had shifted under my feet. People stared at me with an expression I wasn't used to, attention, but not the warm kind. It was the kind you give to something unexpected, something inconvenient, something you wish would quietly disappear. I had spent my entire life disappearing for them. As I stood frozen, a memory hit me like a sudden gust of cold air. Me, at 11 years old, sitting at the long wooden dining table in the ranch house, waiting for my turn to speak. My father and mother were hanging on to every word Colton said about making the basketball team. When I finally mentioned I'd won a county-wide writing contest, my mother smiled politely before turning back to Colton, asking if she wanted her to host a party for his achievement. That night, I learned two things. Pride had to be earned in my family, but only if you were the right child. I would never be that child. Growing up at Grant Ranch wasn't the dream the locals imagined. On the outside, we looked like Southern royalty. Huge wraparound porch, white fences, horses grazing in the sun. Inside, everything revolved around my father's ambition, my mother's social status, and Colton's future. My father used to say, "A ranch survives by passing power to a strong son." He never once considered that a daughter could be strong too. I remember begging them once, just once, to let me join the 4-H livestock competitions with Colton. I'd spent months learning how to train a lamb, practicing every single day after school. The day before the event, my father told me I couldn't participate because it would distract from Colton's big win. They made me stand in the crowd and clap for him instead. I clapped until my hands stung. By high school, I'd learned to stop asking. I buried myself in art, in books, in volunteering, anything that made me feel like I existed. My teachers praised me, my friends admired me, but at home, nothing changed. My mother would complain at charity luncheons that I wasted potential. My father reminded me that dreamers don't keep ranches alive. Even Colton chimed in, smirking. Not everyone's built for the real world, Alyssa. The truth is, I didn't want their world. I didn't want to compete for attention or pretend I loved the ranch deals and business meetings they worshipped. I wanted to help people, especially kids who'd been dealt a rougher hand than I had. So I built my life around mentoring troubled teens, helping them find second chances. To my family, that meant failure. My father once said, "You work with criminals, Alyssa. Don't expect us to celebrate that." He didn't understand. Helping them helped me. Seeing those kids rebuild reminded me that broken things could be repaired, even if my own family never tried to repair what they broke in me. The only person who ever saw me fully was my grandfather, Harold Grant. He was nothing like my father. He wasn't interested in wealth or status. He believed in honesty, compassion, and second chances. I spent more time with him than anyone else growing up. He'd take me out to the very west pasture that my father had just gifted to Colton. We'd sit under an old oak tree, eating cold sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. One summer afternoon, when I was 16 and feeling especially small, he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "Sweetheart, you don't need their praise to know your worth. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones nobody bothers to understand." I tried not to cry, but I did. He wiped my tears with his thumb and said, "One day you'll change lives in ways this ranch never could, and I'll make sure you have what you need to do it." Back then, I thought he meant emotional support, some kind words, maybe a letter for college. I never imagined he meant everything. As I looked around the tent now, the reality of what Eleanor had said pressed into me. My grandfather had left his legacy to me, not because I was the golden child, but because I wasn't. He saw who I was long before anyone else tried. But with that realization came another, heavier truth. If my family hated me for being invisible, they were going to despise me for being chosen. And deep down, I knew the pain I had carried all my life was only the beginning. The moment the tent erupted into whispers, I knew my family wasn't shocked because the will had changed. They were shocked because I was the name attached to it. Their expressions weren't confusion, they were insult. My father recovered first. He always did. His jaw tightened, the vein in his temple pulsing like a warning. My mother's smile froze into something cold and brittle. And Colton looked like someone had yanked the entire world out from under his boots. He threw the deed envelope down like it burned him. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, stepping toward Eleanor. "There's no way Grandpa chose her. She doesn't even understand ranch operations. Hell, she barely shows up to family events." My father jumped in, pointing a finger at Eleanor. "You're making a mistake. That will was finalized years ago. This," he gestured toward me, "is some kind of manipulation." Manipulation. As if I had ever been in a position to manipulate anything in that family. Eleanor didn't flinch. "Mr. Grant updated his will privately the year before he passed. It is legally sound and binding, and he was very clear in his reasoning." I swallowed hard. A part of me wanted her to say it out loud. Another part wasn't sure I was ready. My father took a step closer to me, lowering his voice, but not his anger. "What did you do?" he hissed. "When did you get to him?" I flinched like he'd slapped me. "I didn't do anything." Colton scoffed. "Sure you didn't. You were always Grandpa's little charity project. Guess he fell for your act." My mother added softly, too softly, "Alyssa, sweetheart, if you influenced him in any way, it's better to tell us now. We can fix this quietly." That word, fix, landed like poison. I hadn't tricked my grandfather. I hadn't guilted him. I had simply been myself. But to them, the idea that I could ever deserve something was unimaginable. Before I could say anything, a voice behind me spoke. "Maybe the will isn't the only thing she deserves a piece of." I turned to see her, a girl in a sleek black halter dress, no older than 24, with brown hair pinned into a careful twist. She walked toward us like she belonged there, even though I had never seen her before. My father stiffened instantly. "Oh," she said, her smile too sweet, too sharp. "You didn't tell her, did you?" My blood turned cold. "I'm Savannah Blake," she announced, turning to me with a glittering smile. "Your father's daughter." The air drained from the room. A few guests gasped. Someone dropped a fork. My mother's hand flew to her chest. "Richard," she whispered, but he didn't deny it. He didn't even look at her. Savannah stepped closer to me, and as part of the Grant bloodline, I deserve a share of whatever Harold left behind. My father finally snapped. "Savannah, this is not the time." She raised a brow. "But it is the place, isn't it? Legal matters, inheritance, family." Family. She said it like she owned the word. My head spun. Not because my father had a secret daughter, I'd always sensed shadows around him. No. What broke something inside me was how easily she inserted herself into a legacy I never even been allowed to touch. For years, they made me feel like the outsider, but suddenly, a stranger had more right to stand beside them than I ever did. Savannah's voice softened, dripping with false sympathy. "Alyssa, you can't seriously believe Grandpa wanted you to have everything. That would be unfair to the rest of us." The rest of us. Like I was some intruder in my own bloodline. By now, guests were inching out of the tent, eager to escape the implosion of the Grant family reputation. But the worst was still coming. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages. My mother's, my father's, even Colton's.
each one angrier than the last. Father, you are not equipped for this responsibility. Step away. Mother, you're embarrassing the family. Stop this before it gets worse. Colton, Dad says you're dragging us through hell. Fix it. Now. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't apologize. They didn't care what I felt. They cared that the world might see a version of them they hated, flawed. Then came the rumors. At the nonprofit where I worked, word was spreading that I'd mismanaged funds, that I'd pressured my grandfather to change the will. A donor pulled me aside that afternoon at a community event. "Is it true you're under investigation?" she asked, her tone polite but wary. Under investigation? For what? For existing? Someone was trying to destroy my credibility before I could even understand what was happening. And there was only one place those rumors could have come from: my family. The people who were supposed to protect me. The people who were now determined to bury me. As I walked home that evening, a storm brewing over Nashville's skyline, one truth settled deep in my chest. This wasn't a disagreement. It wasn't a misunderstanding. My family wasn't just angry. They were at war with me. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to stop retreating. In the days that followed, everything in my life started to unravel so quickly. It felt like watching an avalanche in slow motion, knowing the crash was coming, but unable to move out of the way. The first hit came at work. I'd spent years helping teenagers who'd been through hell, kids who had survived abuse, neglect, violence, abandonment. I fought for them like no one had ever fought for me. My job wasn't just a paycheck, it was the only place where I felt needed, seen, respected. But that Monday morning, the director called me into her office. She closed the door gently, as if she already knew she was about to break something fragile. "Alyssa," she said carefully, "we've had several donors reach out with concerns." "Concerns about what?" I asked, even though a sick part of me already knew. "There are allegations," she continued, choosing every word with surgical precision. "Claims that you may have misused program funds and that you coerced your grandfather into altering his will to benefit yourself." My mouth dried. "That's not true. You know me." "I do," she said softly. "But donors panic easily, and when they panic, they pull out." I felt my throat tighten. "So what are you saying?" She folded her hands. "I'm placing you on temporary leave until we can sort this out." Leave. As in, step away. Disappear quietly. Just like my family wanted. I walked out of the building, numb, my legs barely carrying me. The teens who usually shouted, "Miss Grant!" across the courtyard looked at me with confusion when I didn't wave back. The second blow came that night. My landlord, a retired police officer who lived downstairs, knocked on my door with an envelope in hand. "Just giving you a heads up," he said. "With everything going on with your family, well, the neighborhood's talking." I frowned. "Talking about what?" He cleared his throat. "People think you're about to be involved in a big lawsuit, and, well, some are worried the press might come around, so I'm raising rent next month to cover the risk." The risk. I had become a liability just by existing. I wanted to laugh, but all that came out was a broken breath. "I haven't done anything." He shrugged helplessly. "Doesn't matter what's true, matters what people think is true." My father's philosophy, echoing through strangers. When he left, I shut the door and leaned my back against it, sliding to the floor. That was the first time I let myself cry. Really cry. Not the quiet tears I'd learned to hide as a kid, but the messy, shaking, hollow kind that come from losing pieces of yourself you never thought could be taken. The third blow came the next morning in the most unexpected form: silence. My closest friends, people I'd known for years, stopped answering my messages, stopped replying to my calls, stopped inviting me anywhere. Like I suddenly carried something contagious. It didn't take long before one of them finally texted, "It's too much drama, Alyssa. We just need space." Space. That was the word people used when they were scared to say goodbye. By Wednesday, I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. I wandered around my apartment like a ghost, ironically living up to the role my family had always assigned me. Everywhere I looked, something reminded me that I was alone. I sat on my bed that night, staring at my phone, scrolling through the missed calls from unknown numbers. Reporters, investigators, opportunists, everyone wanted a piece of the story. Everyone except the people who should have cared about me. My family had done this. They had poisoned everything I had built, everything my grandfather believed in. At around 3 a.m, a storm rolled in, lightning flickering through my window, and I wrapped my arms around my knees and whispered into the darkness, "I don't know how much more of this I can take." For the first time in years, I felt myself cracking, splitting open in places I didn't even know were fragile. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. It wasn't the inheritance they were trying to take. It was my identity, my purpose, my stability, my sanity. And if something didn't change soon, they might succeed.
The morning after that storm, I woke up with swollen eyes and a throat raw from crying, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel brave. I felt empty. So empty that there was finally space for something new to enter. That something arrived in the form of a phone call. Alyssa? It was Evan Pierce, my closest friend from college, now a respected investigative journalist in Nashville. We hadn't spoken in months because life had gotten busy for both of us, but hearing his voice felt like someone finally throwing a rope into the pit I'd fallen into. "I heard what happened," Evan said. "Are you okay?" The question nearly made me cry again, not because of the words, but because no one in days had asked how I was. "No, I'm really not." "Then I'm coming over." 20 minutes later, he was standing in my living room, hair messy, holding 2 coffees and a paper bag of biscuits. I broke the moment he set them down, collapsing into sobs. Evan didn't rush me. He didn't try to fix anything. He just sat beside me, letting me fall apart without judgment. When I finally calmed, he said gently, "Tell me everything." So I did. The will, the accusations, Savannah, the rumors, the job suspension, the friends disappearing. Evan didn't interrupt, but the more I spoke, the more his expression hardened, slowly, intentionally, like someone assembling armor. "They're not just trying to discredit you, they're trying to erase you," he said when I finished. I nodded. "Feels like they already have." "No," he said firmly, "because you're still here, and you're smarter than all of them combined." He leaned forward. "Tell me, did your grandfather leave anything else behind? Papers, files, notes?" I shook my head. "Not that I know of." But later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Eleanor Briggs, my grandfather's attorney. "Alyssa, I have something for you. Something Harold asked me to give you only if the family contested the will." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" "Come to the office." I didn't hesitate. Evan insisted on driving me, saying I shouldn't face anything alone. When we walked into Eleanor's office, she handed me a small wooden box, dark walnut, simple, carved with my grandfather's initials. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a USB drive.
This, Eleanor said, placing a hand on the box, is your grandfather's personal record. He kept it hidden from everyone, especially your father. My hands trembled as I opened the journal. The pages were filled with my grandfather's careful handwriting. Notes, dates, property records, conversations, meetings. But what made my breath catch were the labeled entries. Unreported land transfers, unauthorized payouts, Colton's forged signatures, Richard's private accounts. It wasn't a journal. It was evidence. Years' worth. I felt the room spin. Why didn't he give this to the authorities? Because he hoped, Eleanor said softly, that your father would change. But he also knew that if he didn't, someone with integrity would need to carry the truth. Someone with integrity. Someone who had never been considered enough until now. Evan took photos of every page, emailing backups to secure encrypted accounts. His voice was steady, but charged. Alyssa, this isn't just ammunition. This is the whole arsenal. For the first time in days, something warm flickered in my chest. Not joy, not victory. Determination. Because now I understood. My grandfather hadn't just left me land. He had left me the truth, and with it, the responsibility to do what he couldn't. That night, Evan and I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by pages, planning every next step. Who to contact, what to verify, what laws had been broken, what leaks to prepare, what protections I'd need. At midnight, he looked at me and said, "You ready to fight back?" I thought of my family, the lies, the humiliation, the cruelty, the years of feeling invisible. I closed my grandfather's journal and said, yes. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally had something stronger than fear. A purpose. The showdown happened on a gray Saturday morning, the kind where the sky hangs low and heavy as if it knows drama is coming. My father had called earlier in the week, demanding a family meeting. No details, no explanations, just an address. Grant Ranch, 10 a.m., do not be late. Evan insisted on coming with me, not inside, but to wait in the car in case things went south. I didn't argue. I needed the anchor. As I stepped onto the wide front porch, memories tugged at me. Quiet footsteps, muted voices, laughter that always seemed to come from rooms I wasn't allowed in. But today felt different. Like I wasn't walking into their house, I was walking into their downfall. The living room was arranged like some kind of intervention. My father stood by the fireplace, arms locked behind his back. My mother sat stiffly on the sofa, pearls tight around her neck. Colton slouched in a leather armchair, his jaw clenched. And beside him, smiling smugly, was Savannah. My father didn't waste time. He lifted a stack of papers from the coffee table. "Let's get straight to it," he said. "This situation has gone too far. The media is circling, investors are calling. We need to resolve this." By resolve, he meant silence me. He pushed the papers toward me. "We're offering you $15 million. You sign over everything. The West Pasture, the trust, all rights tied to Harold's estate." 15 million? More money than I'd ever dreamed of seeing in my life. But it felt dirty, heavy, poisoned. "I'm not signing anything," I said. Colton scoffed loudly. "Alyssa, don't be stupid. You barely understand ranch finances." Savannah leaned back, crossing her legs like she belonged there. "And let's be real, you don't deserve it anyway." My mother held up a hand. "We're trying to be generous, sweetheart." "No," I said calmly. "You're trying to buy me." My father's face reddened.
Your grandfather didn't understand what he was doing. He was old, confused. I reached into my bag, pulled out the leather-bound journal, and set it on the table. The room froze. "What's that?" Colkin asked. I opened it to the first marked page. Grandpa wasn't confused. He was keeping records. My father's voice dropped. "Alyssa, don't." But I did. I read aloud. June 4th, Richard redirected funds from the Whitfield development into a private account. No board approval. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Colton shifted in his seat. Savannah leaned back, alert. I flipped the page. August 19th. Colton forged manager's signatures to expedite unauthorized land transfers. "What the hell?" Colton sputtered. "That's a lie." "No," I replied. Grandpa documented everything. Dates, names, receipts. My father lunged forward, slamming his hand on the journal. "You don't know what you're reading." I pulled it back. And there's more. A lot more. I set the USB drive beside it. "Copies," I said, "verified by multiple sources, backed up to encrypted servers." My father paled. My mother whispered, "Richard, what did you do?" Savannah sat perfectly still, eyes gleaming like she had just discovered a higher stakes game than she expected. "You think you can blackmail us?" my father growled. "This isn't blackmail," I said firmly. "This is truth. The truth Grandpa trusted only me with." The room pulsed with panic. My father turned to my mother. "We can still handle this. We just need—" A knock interrupted him. Evan stepped inside with Eleanor Briggs right behind him. "You!" he barked. "Get out of my house." Eleanor lifted a folder. "This house, along with the West Pasture and the trust, is under Alyssa's legal authority until the estate is finalized." Colton stood up fast. "No, no way. We'll contest it." "You can," Eleanor said calmly, "but contesting means forfeiting everything you currently have from Harold's estate." Silence. Savannah swallowed hard. My mother looked like she might faint. And my father? For the first time in my life, he looked small. Eleanor continued, "Copies of Harold's journal have already been submitted to state regulators. Investigations will begin soon. If you choose to escalate, the process will only accelerate." My father sank into a chair, his face ghost white. Colton muttered a curse under his breath and stared at the floor. My mother whispered, "Alyssa, please stop this." But I wasn't hurting them. I was simply refusing to be hurt anymore. "I'm not signing your deal. I'm honoring Grandpa's wishes. Everything stays as he intended." Savannah stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. "I didn't sign up for this mess." She snapped at my father before storming out. Her exit said everything about her loyalties. She didn't have any. Evan stepped beside me. "Ready?" I nodded. As we walked out, I turned back only once. Not out of guilt, out of closure. They looked at me differently now, not as the invisible daughter, but as the one person they couldn't control. And for the first time in my entire life, I walked away from that house feeling like I finally belonged somewhere. Not to them, but to myself. Life didn't magically transform after that day at Grant Ranch. There were no fireworks, no cinematic music swelling in the background. What came instead was something quieter, something steadier, like the slow return of breath after being underwater for far too long. The investigations into my father's dealings began within weeks. He stepped down before the board could vote him out, claiming health issues, though everyone in Nashville knew the truth. My mother withdrew from the social circles she once ruled, avoiding luncheons and charity galas,
terrified someone might ask her a question she couldn't spin. And Colton, well, he tried to launch a business on his own, but without the Grant name behind him, the deals fell apart one after another. I didn't celebrate any of it. Their collapse didn't feel like triumph. It felt like finally setting down a weight I didn't realize I'd carried my entire life. But what I did celebrate, quietly in small victories, was the rebuilding of my own world. I turned the West Pasture into the site of the Harold Grant Youth Center, a place for second chances, just like the ones my grandfather always believed in. The old barn was renovated into classrooms. The paddock became an outdoor therapy space. We added counseling rooms, tutoring corners, and a workshop where teens could learn trades, carpentry, metalwork, automotive basics. The first day we opened, I stood under the oak tree my grandfather and I used to sit beneath. The sun filtered through its branches, warm and gentle. Kids ran past me, laughing, shouting, living, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. Joy. Real, unfiltered joy. The kind I had been craving my whole life without knowing how to name it. One afternoon, a few weeks later, a teenage girl named Harper, a quiet 15-year-old who had been through more than most adults, handed me a folded note. She said, "You help people like me feel safe." Inside the note were just 3 words. "Thank you, Alyssa." I pressed it to my chest and cried in the hallway where no one could see, not because I was sad, but because for the first time, someone wasn't taking from me. Someone was giving back. Evan became more than just a friend. He became a constant, someone who showed up even when I didn't know how to ask. He helped with press for the center, donated equipment, even organized volunteers. Sometimes he'd bring me coffee at sunrise and say, "Your grandfather would be proud of you," and I'd feel that warm, steady hope growing again. As for my family, I made a choice, one that once would have terrified me. I cut ties completely. Not in anger, not out of revenge, but out of peace. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired. Some wounds close only when you finally stop letting people reopen them. And surprisingly, letting go didn't feel like losing family. It felt like finding myself. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see when all of this began. Being chosen wasn't the blessing. Being unseen wasn't the curse. The real gift was becoming strong enough to walk away from the people who never saw me at all. My grandfather's legacy wasn't land. It wasn't money. It wasn't a trust or a title. It was the belief that compassion is strength, that purpose matters more than prestige, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the loudest truth. To anyone listening who has ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or told you weren't enough, here's what I learned. You don't need your family's approval to build a good life. You don't need their recognition to have worth, and you certainly don't need their permission to rise. Your story is yours to write. Your future is yours to claim, and your worth has never been measured by the people who refuse to see it. If my journey meant anything to you, tell me in the comments, what did you have to overcome to become who you are today? I'd love to hear your story, because maybe it's time for someone to finally see you, too.